If there's a part of your worksheet that you want Excel to treat as a separate data sheet from the rest of the worksheet, then go ahead and convert that range into a table. In fact, the definition of a table is that it has contiguous rows and columns of data and not empty rows in between the data or empty columns that Excel treats as a separate data sheet from the rest of the worksheet. So to go ahead and convert this range into a table, I recommend that you select it first, and there's two ways that you can go ahead and convert a range into a table. Here's the first way. Either come up here and click on the Insert tab, go to the Tables group and click on Table. You get the pop-up window that says, okay, where's the data for your table? By default, since we had it selected, it's got it selected here. Of course, if we need to make changes to it, you can either type it in or click on the collapsible dialog box button and just click and drag to select the appropriate range. Hit Enter on the keyboard, it pops back open, and then by default it's got My Table Has Headers checked, meaning that in your table, do you have a header row that tells you what each column is about, the label for each column? So here's the header row, there's the label for this column, that's about essential oils, this is for the category, price, and stock, and so on. If everything looks good, then go ahead and click OK, and hey, there you go. You have banded rows of color within your table, so it's easier to track with the eye when you go from left to right, because when you're looking at clove, you have a lighter shade of blue in between two darker shades. So think of it like bumpers along each side of the bowling alley here to keep your eye in line when you go over here to the right hand side and look at what you have on order. And then you also get these drop down arrows that we'll talk about in a later training video, but basically you can go ahead and do your sorting within the table here, ascending, descending, do some filtering. That's one way to go ahead and convert a data range into a table. The other way, let me go ahead and hit undo, is to, on the Home tab, come over here to the Styles group and click on Format as Table, and you can see you've got the light, medium, and dark categories. Go ahead and find one, hover over it if you want the exact name. That one says Table Styles Medium 2. Go ahead and click on it. It confirms the range that we have selected. If we want a different range, then go ahead and make the change here. We've got headers or labels for our column in the header row here or the first row. So click Okie dokie and it converts it. Cool. And then once the table is created, you have up here the Related Contextual Design tab that it's available when you have any cell in the table selected. When you click off of it, it disappears. Go ahead and click back on it or click on a cell within the table and it comes back up. And let's come over here to the Properties group and say, okay, the name of the table isn't the generic Table 3. We're going to call it my spiffy table because, hey, everything we do here is spiffy. Hit Enter to accept it. And it says, look, we don't like spaces, so go ahead and use underscore. Let me click Okie dokie. And what it means by that is that an underscore, it looks like a space, but it really isn't a space. So if I go my underscore spiffy underscore table, the underscore down at the bottom, I don't really notice it, so I just look at the my spiffy table, but it's something that Excel needs because it doesn't like spaces when it comes to naming a table. Go ahead and hit Enter and it's happy. When it comes to making modifications to your table, it's pretty simplistic in that if you want to add additional fields or columns or rows, or you want to delete them for that matter, just go ahead and right-click on any cell. So you get the shortcut menu and go to Insert. You can see that you can insert a column to the left of the column that you're currently in. So be mindful of that because if you don't want a new field or column at the beginning here, but in between these two columns, then go ahead and right-click on the latter column and go to Insert so we can insert a column to the left of the current column that I'm in. You also get the option to insert a row above the current row that you're in. But if you go to the last row and right-click and go to Insert, not only do you get it above, but also below. Let's go ahead and do below and type in an essential oil. Typing it in and hitting the Tab key, and there we go. Now wait a second, you're looking at this going, hey, you just typed in the same record here. You've got Lang Lang as a sedative, the same price and stock and on order. You have duplicates. Not only do I have a duplicate for Lang Lang, but also I believe for frankincense here and there. It's got the same category, price, in stock, on order. It's pretty simplistic to find the duplicates within this small of a database, but if you have a huge database and you're like, okay, let's see Lang Lang, which is so fun to say, Lang Lang. It may be hard to go, let's see, I remember seeing that on row 2522. Okay, that's really annoying. Excel has a feature where you can remove duplicates from the database if you don't want them by coming up here, clicking on the Design tab, going to the Tools group, and there it is right there. Go ahead and click on it. and it says to delete duplicate values, select one or more of the columns that contain duplicates. So in other words, you have your criteria here. In other words, if I go ahead and uncheck all this here, or you can say unselect all and then just check one to make it easier, and say it has to meet just this condition here, essential oils, where it has to have the same name in order to remove the others that, well, by the same name, they're duplicated. So it would be frankincense here or frankincense down below. One of those is going to be removed because we can't have two or more, and it will do it when I click OK. Now what makes this nice is that if I do have the same duplicate names here, but they have different categories or different price or any other field is different, then to make sure I don't delete what's not actually a duplicate entirely across the board, but just for maybe in name, then I want to say, okay, it has to meet all these conditions in order for it to be a duplicate. Because if it varies in any one of these fields, do not delete it. That way I can find out if it was just a typo or somebody actually added another essential oil and it's supposed to be categorized in like another category of calming. So, having checked all these, or in this case, since everything's a duplicate in all those other fields anyways, I can just check the first name and say, okay, if it's got a duplicate first name, which it does, click Okie dokie, and it got rid of the two duplicate values. Click OK, and it kept one of the Lang Langs and one of the frankincenses, but got rid of the other ones because, again, they were duplicates. Cool. Now, not only does it work for the table here, but if you have a data range that's not converted into a table, and of course you don't get the Design tab to go to the Tools group to remove duplicates, then you want to come here to the Data tab, to the Data Tools group, and you get the same feature there to remove duplicates that are in your database that, well, aren't part of a table here. Let's go ahead and go back to the Design tab, and let's do some calculations. Yes, up here in the Table Style Options, if you check Total Row, it actually adds a row down at the bottom for you to go ahead and click in any one of those cells. You get a drop-down arrow, and from the arrow you get a list of functions that you can say, okay, for this column, let's go ahead and get the average cost for all the essential oils, and then what we have in stock, let's get the sum or total of everything in stock and what we have on order. And then finally, if you want to convert this back into a range and not have it as a table, then click anywhere inside of the table, come back up here on the Design tab to the Tools group and say you want to convert it back to a range. Click on it. It says, are you sure? Yes. It removes the fields, but it doesn't remove the formatting that's been applied to it. And also the total row, which if you click in it, doesn't give you that total, but it leaves behind what you had selected, like the average, the sum, in which case you can go ahead and select the entire range here, and either on the Home tab to the Editing group, click on the Eraser drop-down arrow and clear all formats. But if I do that, I get rid of the currency for this range here. So maybe instead of doing it for all, I can go ahead and break it down one by one and say, okay, up here in the Font group, click on the Theme Colors drop-down arrow and say No Fill, so I don't have any color within the cells there. And then the borders, you can still see I've got those blue lines. Click on the Borders drop-down arrow and say No Borders, and you can keep picking at it. I'm going to go ahead and hit undo a couple of times here so I can go back to where it was before we converted it back to a data range, which was a table, so I can continue with the next couple of training videos. Now to change the formatting of your table, let me go ahead and click inside the table so I can bring up the Related Contextual Design tab. Let's go to the Table Style Options group and Banded Rows. Now, because I chose this style, it has what are called banded rows, meaning that every other row is going to be the same color, including these rows, every other one. And the purpose for that is that when it comes to navigating your eye from left to right in those rows, if you have the same color on either side, it's easier to keep track of the row that you're on, as opposed to unchecking it and going, let's see, clove, whoa, I think I'm right here. I mean, you can imagine if you had dozens of columns here and you're trying to keep your eye on that same row. Well, if it's banded, it makes it a lot easier if you can keep focus on the white here in between the two blues here. So think of it like a bowling alley. You've got the two bumpers on either side, so when you bowl, you can keep a straight line there and not get in the gutter. So banded rows, you can uncheck that and say I want banded columns if you need to keep track of your columns when you're going down one column or another, so you don't, when you're going down, your eye doesn't go over into the other columns. Let me go back to banded rows. You can also place special formatting on the first column to make it pop. So you can say, okay, this is what it's all about, our essential oils, so it doesn't blend in with the rest. Or you can do it on the last column and it gets it in bold there in case if the last column needs to be emphasized. Let me go ahead and uncheck that. And then as far as the styles go, if you don't like blue and you want to change it, then come up here to the Table Styles group, click on the Quick Styles drop-down arrow and select something else. Ooh, purple. And you can see when I hover over it, there's the name of it, Table Style Medium 5. If you don't want style applied to your table here, you want to clear it out, but still maintain the functionality of the table where you got the drop-down arrows for filtering or sorting and also a total row if you added one. Then come up here on the Design tab to the Table Styles group, click on Quick Styles, come down here and click Clear, and it looks like it's naked, like it has no clothes on without the style. You can do that, or if you want to create your own custom style, because when you come up here and click on Quick Styles, you don't like what you see, then come down here and click on New Table Style, and let's give it a name here and call it My Spiffy Style. And you can do it for any one of these elements here for the entire table, but keep in mind, whatever element you do it for, when you click on Format, you can format with font, the border, or the fill color. Those are the only 3 formatting options that you get. So let me click Cancel. Let's do it for first row stripe, meaning that you know how you have banded rows, so every other row is a stripe. Beginning with the first row within the table, select it, click Format, and then go to the Fill tab, and it's close to Halloween. Let's choose a Halloween color, kind of like a light orange. Click Okie dokie, and you can see over here in the preview window how it alternates for the first row stripe. You can do a second row, click Format, and let's do something a lighter gray. Click Okie dokie, and you can see it over here. In any case, go ahead and select any one of these and change the formatting for like the fill color or the font type. And when you're done, go ahead and click Okie dokie. And then to apply it to the table, come back up here to the Table Styles group, click on the Quick Styles drop-down arrow, and there it is in the Custom section. You can see when I hover over it, it's My Spiffy Style. Click on it and it's applied. And you can see that the first row, well, not the first row, that's the header row, but the first row below the header row begins with orange and alternates here between gray and orange. And then if you want to get rid of the style, delete it, just come back up here, click on the drop-down arrow, right-click on it. Of course, you could modify it, but in this case, we're going to delete it and say Okie dokie, and then it goes to a default style here. One last thing is that these styles are specific to the worksheet or the workbook and aren't global, so you can't go ahead and copy this yet to other workbooks. Maybe in 2015 or 16, whenever Excel comes out with a new version, they'll have that option available. To filter and or sort records within your table, go ahead and click on any drop-down arrow, and for the essential oils, I don't want to see all the records, just those that have cinnamon and clove. Christmas smells. Go ahead and click Okie dokie, and hey, there you go. And notice that next to the drop-down arrow, it's got a funnel. It's to let you know that you're not seeing all the records and it's being filtered by the essential oils. So that way, if you're looking at this and going, oh, I guess that's all I've got for selling our products, you want to make sure that you look up here on any one of these arrows to verify that none of them have a little funnel to show you that, hey, if it does and you want to see all the records, go ahead and change it back to all. Before we do that, let's go ahead and take a look at this. As you recall in an earlier training video, we added our totals row, and this did the average for the price column. So there's the average between the two, and if you want to verify it, click on the drop down arrow and you can see that average is highlighted. Let me hit the escape key and let's go to in stock, click on the drop down arrow, and it's adding up or summing up the range there. Let me hit the escape key, and then to go ahead and unfilter this, click on the one that has the filter, the drop down arrow, and select all, click OK, and there you go. You can also do multiple filters, like let's do it for category. Uncheck all and do it for antibacterial and anti-cancer, click OK. And then between the two, let's say we want the price less than $30. So we can go down to number filters and go to less than, and it's less than 30, hit enter, and it's cinnamon. Let's go ahead and clear these filters out by clicking on the drop down arrow and choosing all, clicking on this one and choosing all, and we're back to where we started. Now for sorting, you can click on the drop down arrow and, well, by default it looks like it's sorted A to Z, but you can go the other way, Z to A, and it flips it. And you can see the little arrow that's pointing down next to the triangle that's turning down there. So it's sorted descendingly. If you click on it and go ascendingly, it flips back up, and then you got the arrow. If you don't want to see the arrow, well, you can click on the drop down triangle here and go to sort by color and do a custom sort. And you can see it's right there. Just delete it, click OK, it gets rid of it. It doesn't remove the sort, it just gets rid of the arrow, which brings up a good point. If I flip this and go descending, and you got the arrow pointing down, click on the drop down arrow to sort, to custom sort, delete it, click OK, it doesn't flip it back, does it? It just removes the sort and leaves it where it's at. So keep that in mind. So let's go back to A to Z and click on the drop down arrow, do sort, custom sort. And in addition to that sort, I can add another level and say, okay, after you're done sorting the essential oils, then go ahead and sort by another field here. And the purpose behind that is that once it sorts by essential oils, and if it has duplicates, like I've got 3 cinnamons but in different categories, then once it does the first sort and it groups all the cinnamons together, and the second sort, or then by, is categories, and we have an antibacterial, antiparasitic, and let's see, anti-cancer, it'll sort that out. So let's see, B comes before C, so it would be B, C, and then P, the last one there. I'm going to go ahead and click cancel. Now this is very simplistic for the table. You can also do this in a normal data range, which I'll show you in a later training video. And what you learn in that, which is going to be the basics here, but also something more in depth and advanced, you can apply it here to your table. So you want to make sure that you watch the other training videos on filtering and also sorting. The DSUM, DAVERAGE, and DCOUNT functions will do just what they sound like: sum up, average up, or count up a range of cells that I specify, but it's going to be based upon a criteria that I set in a mini or sub database. So before it can go ahead and add up any range of cells for the DSUM, it's going to be based upon a condition or criteria that I set over here in a mini database. And to create that mini or sub database, I just went ahead and selected the row header for my main database and pasted it over here, and then changed the formatting so it's distinguished between the main database and the sub database. And then in the sub database I can say, okay, let's go ahead and add up all the videos, but the condition or criteria that it has to meet before it can add up is that the videos in sales have to be greater than or equal to 75,000. And then hit enter. Make sure that the equal always comes after the greater than or less than symbol, because if it's before, you're going to get erroneous results. So if I look over here for the videos, which one of the cells here was greater than or equal to 75,000? It was Max Klinger. I'm going to hold down the control key and select Homer, and then Frank, and then Britt. And you can see down below, when it sums it up, it's going to be 379,000 and some change there. So let me go ahead and insert a function that will add up that range that is greater than or equal to 75,000 for the videos. And what I did over here is I've got the exercises I want to go through to get the average, total, the sum, and the count, so you can go through all 3 functions. Actually, when you understand one function and how it works, the other 2 come really easy because it's the same syntax. It's just that do you want to add up, average, or count? Let's go ahead and do the sum. So equals DSUM, and you can see over here in the pop-up, it adds the numbers in the field or the column of records in the database that matches the condition you specify. So with it selected, let's go ahead and hit the tab key to pop it open so we can see the syntax. And the first argument is, where's the database? That's in bold. Let's go ahead and scroll over, click and drag and select the database, and make sure that you include the row header. And then, well, we can look up here in the formula bar. But if you don't know the remainder part of the syntax like I do, then you may want to go ahead and scroll back so it pops open. Or you can go ahead up here on the formula bar and click on the insert function. It picks it up here so it explains it so you can see it here and not have to scroll back and forth. And then we can go to the field here, and it says field is either the label of the column in double quotation marks or the number that represents the column's position in the list. So it's going to be videos here, so I can do double quotation marks, meaning open quotes, and then the name videos, close quotes, or the position in the database is, let's see, beginning over to the left-hand side is column 1, 2, so it's going to be number 2. We'll do both. Let's just go with videos first. And then the criteria here is the range of cells that contains the conditions you specify. So go ahead and click on the collapsible dialog box button and select well, make sure you select the row header so it can match the names from the subdatabase to the main database, and then also the one row below, which contains the criteria. Hit enter on the keyboard to pop it open, and you can see that we already got a result here that lets me know that we're on target, because if we got 0 or nothing there, then something's going on. But I still may want to verify that I've got this set up correctly, so after I click Okie dokie, the sum of those videos in sales that's greater than or equal to $75,000 is $379,000. As you just recall, rewind the video. We did 77, that's greater than 75, and then we control click these other three, and there you go, 379,100. Cool. Let me go ahead and scroll back and double click within the cell. And as you recall in that insert function pop-up window, it says you can either have the field in double quotations here, or just the position in the database, which is from the left, the column position that is, which begins with 1, 2, so it's the second. Type in 2, hit enter, and we get the same results. Cool. Now let's go ahead and do the average. We don't have to do it for the same column here. We can do it for another one, but keep in mind that the sum is based upon the videos, so we may want to do it on the videos to get the average, or we can just go ahead and delete the sum here so we're not confused and having this pulling from one column, that pulling from another column, and this one pulling from another column, but having it set or based upon the criteria just for the videos. Well, if that's what you want, then that works, but I want to do it separately, so if I'm going to do it for another column like the average, let's do it for the books. So I don't want the condition or the criteria based upon the videos. So for the books, let's go ahead and set that and say that for the sales in books for these employees, anybody that I want to get the average for the upper end sales, and let's say that the upper end sales is 130,000 plus, so let's do greater than or equal to 130,000, hit enter, and let's get the average there for those that are equal to or above 130,000 by typing in equals DAVERAGE. Hit the tab key to pop open the function. Where's the database? You can go ahead and type it in, but since I'm close, I can just click and drag here. Hit comma. And then the field, well, I can type in books, or it's the column 1, 2, third column, 3, comma, and then the criteria. Let me click and drag to select the row header, and then the row below that contains the criteria. Hit enter, and there's the average. Let's see if it checks out. So anything greater than or equal to 130,000 in the books, there's greater than 130, there, just those three there. So there we go, 142,157, that's close. In fact, if I want to go ahead and round up and not have 3 decimal places with this selected, let me come up here to the numbers group on the home tab, and let's go ahead and decrease the decimal, decrease. Then we can just go down to a single decimal place and leave it as is. That's up to you. Okay. You see the pattern here. So if we do the final one, the count of the total, let's say that we want to count up how many employees in consulting made over 107,000. So let's go ahead and delete it for books and say for consulting it's got to be greater than or equal to 107,000. And of course when I type that in, now the condition for the average of the total for the books, I mean, you see how you got to keep track of that, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Let's go ahead and equals, and there you go. Counts the cells containing numbers of records in the database that match the conditions you specify. Let's go ahead with it selected, hit the tab key to pop open the function. Again, it's the same thing. Scroll over, select the database, comma, what's the field? Well, it's the last one here. We can type in open quotes, consulting, close quotes, comma, and then the criteria is going to be within the range here in my mini subdatabase. Go ahead and hit enter, and there's only 2 that made over 107,000 for consulting. Now please keep in mind that when you go ahead and use the D functions, that the subdatabase has the exact same labels as you have in the main database. So instead of retyping it, I recommend just selecting it, copying it, and pasting it, then reformatting it, and you're good to go. And then of course you can go ahead and change it. Let's double click and say instead of greater than or equal to, let's do less than, hit enter. So we got a total of 6 employees, 2 were above 107,000, less than is 4. Okay. You can also do multiple criteria or conditions here. So to meet this count, they have to be less than 107,000 in consulting, but greater than, let's say, 100,000 in on-site training. Hit enter. And there's only 3 that meet both conditions. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. Less than 107,000 here are these 4. And then looking over in the on-site, that one is greater than 100,000, that one, but not that one. So wow, that guy's doing really bad. There are two functions that I want to show you when it comes to calculating the number of days in between two dates. And the example that I have here is for my quarters 1, 2, 3, and 4, the start and end date. I've got the days 360 and the year frac. First of all, the days 360. Now I know there's 365 days in the year, but if you want to do generalities where you have a nice rounded number, then go ahead and use the days 360. To do that, just go ahead and hit equals on the keyboard, type in the first couple of letters for the name of the function. There it is. Arrow down to it. You can see in the pop-up returns the number of days between two dates based on a 360-day year. So in other words, each month, or the 12 months, they're going to have 30 days each. So for February, even though it's 28, it's going to be 30. August has 31, it's going to be 30. So it gives us a nice rounded number. Why would you want to use that? Well, again, if it's generalities and you don't want to deal with fractions or an extra day, then go ahead and use the function. With it selected here, go ahead and hit the tab key to pop open the function. So we got the first argument, the start date, well, it's in that cell, comma, to go to the next argument, the end date's in that cell, comma, and then it says, do you want to go ahead and use the US or the European method? If you don't choose any and you ignore that last part here, that last argument where you hit the backspace key and you just hit enter, it'll go to the US method. So let's do comma, and you can double click on false, the US, hit enter, and there you go, 90 days. So from the start of January to the end of April, it's not going to count the last day here, the end date, but the days starting with January 1st, we've got 90 days. Now if you want to go ahead and calculate it as a percentage, then hit equals, go ahead and select the cell and divide it by 360, not 365, because again, we're basing this on 360-day year to get nice round numbers. Hit enter. There you go, 2500. Well, if you want that as a percentage, then go ahead and select it. Come up here in the number group on the Home tab and select percentage. Ooh, that looks good. And then we can quickly go ahead and select both cells and hover over the lower right hand corner and click and drag the black autofill handle to copy this cell over 3 cells and then the contents of that cell, the formula over 3. Now if you want exact days from the start to the end of quarter 1, then let's go ahead and use the year frac. So equals year, and then there you go, arrow down, it's right there, returns the year fraction representing the number of whole days between the start and the end date. So hit the tab key to pop open the function. There we go, we got the start date in that cell, comma. The next argument is in bold, end date. It's that cell, go ahead and select it, comma. And then it gives us a list. What's the basis? Well, we already did 360, let's do 365. Double click, hit enter, and there you go. That's got it in decimal point. You can convert it to percentage, but let's leave it right there for now. And go ahead and select it, hover over the lower right hand corner to get the black cross, the autofill handle, click and drag. And in that calculation, if we're like, okay, that doesn't tell me the exact number of days, then go ahead and click in the cell above and hit equals for that decimal point, and then multiply it by the total number of days within the year, 365, and hey, there we go. At least for 2013, the first quarter's got 90 days. Let's go ahead and copy and paste that formula over and see what we get by hovering over the lower right hand corner, getting the black cross, click and drag over, and with the selection there you can see the sum down below in the status bar is 365. Sweet. If the days are all you care about and the decimal points are like, well, you can always go ahead and select it and convert it to a percentage, and it doesn't update or change the results here. Still gives us the exact number of days. The other thing that you can do is go ahead and do a simple formula that says, okay, equals the start date minus that cell, the end date, and hit enter, and it's a negative 90. Now, why is it negative? Well, when it comes to the date format, Excel doesn't see it in the date, it sees it as a number. Let me show you. I'm going to go ahead and select this and convert it to what Excel sees these dates as. By coming up here in the number group, changing the format to general, and the dates are converted into numbers that you can see. The earlier dates are a smaller number and the later dates are a larger number. So if you take the smaller number and subtract it from a larger number, then you're going to get a negative. But if you equal the larger number, which is the more recent date, and subtract it from an earlier date, a lesser number, hit enter, then you get a positive number. Now, I don't know what dates these are, so I want to go ahead and select the range and say, fine, Excel, you look at it that way. I'm going to look at it the short date way. And you can also say, what date am I going to be at? If I add, let's say, 20 days to the start date there, we'll keep it simple. We'll say equals here, that date, plus 20, enter. Hey, there you go. So you can do some simple formulas with your dates here and adding or subtracting days. You also get the other functions that you can use to get in today's date if you want to include that as part of the formula, or just find out what today's date is. Then go ahead and hit the equals key on the keyboard and you've got today, which returns the current date formatted as a date. Go ahead with it selected here, hit the tab key to pop it open, hit enter, there's today's date. If you want the date and time, then equals now, which returns the current date and time. Hit the tab key to pop open the function, hit enter, and okay, because it can't squeeze the date in with the time, you can see when I hover over those pound symbols that it displays the date and the time. But because it can't squeeze it in so small of a column width, then let's come up here and hover in between the two column headers until I can see arrows pointing in opposite directions there, and click and drag to stretch it out, and there we go. Now if I type in something else anywhere within the spreadsheet, it'll actually update that to the current time. So if I delete that, it rolls it up and it says, okay, what's the current time? 4, rolls it, there's the current time, which is military time. So starting at noon, when you go to 1 o'clock, that's 13, 2 o'clock is 14, in any case you get down to 5 o'clock, which is 1700 hours. Now you can go ahead and perform calculations with today's date if you're like, okay, let's see, today, let's do equals today's date, and what's the date going to be 30 days from now? Plus 30, hit enter, and it's going to be October the 18th. When it comes to sorting a database like the one I have here for my Dreamforce payroll, if I want to sort the records by the last name, so all the records that begin with the last name with the letter A up at the top down to the B's, C's, all the way down to the Z's, well, the question that I have is that when I sort it by last name, does it keep the record intact? In other words, when I sort and I put all the A's up at the top, let's say Appleman is the first one, does it just move the data within the column so Appleman's up here, now it's Max Appleman instead of bobbing for Appleman? Well, if your database is built correctly, Excel will see the logic and it will keep the record intact. So it'll be Bob Appleman with the same social security number, hire date, and so on. And it won't screw up the last names and not keep the records together. And in fact, we'll go over in just a minute the database design flaws, the things you want to look out for so it doesn't mess up your database when you sort by one of these fields. But before we do that, let's go ahead and see what it looks like when we do some sorting within a database that's been built correctly, to see how Excel handles it. And you can do it one of many ways. Like for example, if I want to sort by the first name column, just go ahead and click in any cell in the first name column, and you can either right click on the cell, in the shortcut menu go down to sort, and you can do it, well, sorting ascending A to Z, descending Z to A, or condescending, and then you've got these other sorts and you got a custom sort. So if I do A to Z, hey, there we go, A, B, C, D, all the way down to the Z's. And did it keep bobbing for Appleman together, his record intact? Yes, it didn't, switch Bob and just shifted all the first names, so they're sorted, but it kept the records together. And instead of being in second place, he's now in third. But that was the list order, and if I want to go back to the list order, then of course you can come over here and right click in the shortcut menu, go to sort, and do smallest to largest, and we're back to where we started. Or you can come up here on the Home tab to the editing group and click on the sort drop down arrow and you get the 3 options, or on the data tab you also get the 3 options here, including the custom sort. Now what about that custom sort? Let's go ahead and click on it, and the current sort is by list from smallest to largest. If you want to do it here as well and say, okay, let's switch it to another column or keep it for the list and say it's going to be largest to smallest and click okie dokie, well, there you go. Larger numbers down to the smaller numbers. Let's click on custom sort again. If I delete that level and click okie dokie, it doesn't flip. It stays where it's at, it just removes it from the custom sort window. So if I want it back, then I have to go ahead and click on A to Z, so it does it ascendingly here. Let me go ahead and click on it again. You can actually do what are called consecutive sorts, where you can sort by one field and then by another and then by another, and you can sort as many fields as you want, but it goes in the order of the most important one being sorted first. So whatever field is the most important one, like let's say by last name, I'll do that first, and let's say last name, and we'll keep it A to Z. Then after it's done sorting by last name and it finds any duplicates, then let's add another level and say then by, then go ahead and sort by the first name. Let me click over here and say descending. So in my database I've got two Allens. So when it sorts the last name, it sees duplicates. After it sees two duplicates, then it goes to the next sort and it sorts the first names. And it will sort the first names descending Z to A. Let's see what it looks like. Go ahead and click Okie dokie, and there we go. We've got ascending A's all the way down to the Z's. Then when it finds duplicates, like we've got two Allens here, then it comes over here between the two duplicates and it says, okay, how do we want to sort these guys? Well, we said first name, descending, so Z to A. So T comes before M, there you go. And you can see that down here as well for the Burns. After it sorts and it's got duplicates here, it goes then to the first name, which is the second sort, and it says, okay, descending, M comes before F, and it proves it there as well. And then, of course, if you open up the sort and you delete the levels here and you click Okie dokie, nothing happens. If you want to go back to the way it was, then whatever the default is, go ahead. In my case, it was the list. Come up here and do ascending A to Z. Now, what about those database design flaws? Let me go ahead and bring up my document. And Excel will have trouble filtering and or sorting a poorly designed database. And here are the 6 things you want to look out for. If there's different formatting within a column, in other words, all data must be of the same format. So if we go back to my database here, I've got like maybe bold for Burns, italics for Wiggums within the same column, and then the color red, and then underline for Klinger. The formatting is inconsistent, so Excel can't look at the logic and say, okay, which one is your header row that I don't sort, which is this one, because the formatting up here is different from the formatting down below. When you have all these different formats applied in the same column, then Excel doesn't see the logic, and so you're going to get erroneous results. Let's go back to our document here. Also, mixing text and values in the same column must be one or the other. So if I come back here, and I've got text here, numbers here, text there, numbers there. Does that make sense? Let's go ahead and go back. A blank row, you take your chances with blank rows. So we're going to go back. If we've got blank rows and a blank row and a blank row, and it's not all together, well, 50-50, it might figure out the logic and sort it correctly. Let's go ahead and go back. Border separation. Use formatting for borders not drawing. Let me go back here. In other words, there is an option that you can go ahead and draw your borders, but instead of drawing the borders, if you come up here on the Home tab, go ahead and use the bottom border format if you want to add borders to your database here. And more importantly, I did it up here to separate and say, okay, this is my header row or the labels for these columns here, that when I sort, it doesn't sort the actual word last with all the other last names down below. It keeps it from being sorted because Excel goes, I guess we have formatting up here that's different from the rest down below. So this is going to be the header row, the row that contains the labels that I don't sort with the data down below. Let's go back, and there you go. Column labels format isn't a different format than the rest of the data. If it isn't different, and we put last here first, and it's not bold, and it doesn't have a border separator, I use the border box to add the border down below these labels here. If it blends well, then Excel is going to go, okay, I guess we don't have any labels for this database. So when you sort, last will be down at the L's here, depending on if you do it ascending or descending, where it might be a little bit up here. Okay, let's go back here, and you don't add spaces in the cell. Use the alignment button. So let me come back. If you come in here and you double click and you're like space, 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 that's not going to work. Let me hit the escape key to not accept the change. Use the alignment buttons up here in the alignment group on the Home tab and go center or right. The autofilter feature is the one that we saw when we converted a range into a table, how it had those little drop-down arrows next to each column label. Well, if you don't want to convert your data range into a table to get those drop-down arrows, then just click anywhere within the database. So Excel knows that you want to apply that feature to this database, and come up here on the Home tab to the editing group, click on Sort and Filter, and click on Filter, and you get the drop-down arrows, just as if this was converted into a table. And then the benefits behind that, no pun intended, let's click on the benefits drop-down arrow. You get the sorting. You also get the filter saying, okay, I don't want to see all the records that have the benefits. That includes dental, dental, medical, medical, and blanks. Let's just see those that have medical. Check it, click okie dokie, and it filters them out. Now, just like in the table training video, when you filter for records, it'll show you that there's a funnel next to that little drop-down arrow or triangle. So if you're looking at this going, I guess that's all the records that we have, well, you want to make sure that you look up here, and if you see a funnel next to any downward triangle or arrow, then you know you've got more records and it's filtering those records by that field. And you can see over here actually on the row headers that you're missing records from, let's see, between 8 and 11. So it filtered those out because it didn't meet the criteria that I set here for the medical benefits and between 11 and 21 and so on. So to go ahead and to go back to where we were, click on the funnel drop down arrow and say you want to see all, click okie dokie, and there we go. We have all the records back. Now for some more custom filtering, you can click on, let's say for the rate drop down arrow, when it comes to dealing with numbers, and let's say that it's got to be less than $50 an hour for the rate. And when I click OK, of course it'll filter for only those records that are less than $50 an hour. But what I can do is I can also add another test saying that it has to meet in addition to being less than $50 an hour. Let's say it's got to be greater than $25 an hour. That's what the AND does. As you recall in the AND or function training videos, AND has to meet as many conditions as you set, and in this window you only get 2 conditions to choose from. So it has to be less than 50 and then greater than 25, or means it can meet either or. It can meet less than 50 or greater than 25, in which case it doesn't make sense to do it with what I have selected here because less than 50 includes 25 and greater than 25 includes that above 50. So less than 50 includes 25 and below, and then greater than 25 includes 50 and above, so that doesn't make sense, but you get the point here. So let's go ahead and click okie dokie. So everything less than 50, yes. Greater than 25, yes. And you can also do additional filters. So in addition to that one, we can do it for hours. Click on the drop down arrow and say, okay, numbers filter, let's say it's got to be less than, let's just do less than 40. Click okie dokie. Well, that narrows it down. And then for the benefits, let's say they have to have, uncheck this, just medical, click okie dokie because, hey, maybe we're trying to find out those who don't earn that much, where they're between $50 and $25 an hour, and they're not working full time, they're working less than that, they're getting medical benefits, and see if we can help them out just a bit, maybe give them a pay raise. And these are the ones that I'm looking at. So you can see I've got a filter for this field, and that field. So to go ahead and restore all this, you could go back and click on the drop down arrow and change it and get rid of the filters, or if you got a lot of filters going on, that could be quite time consuming. Then if you just came up here on the Home tab to the editing group, click on the sort and filter drop down arrow and say clear, and it clears all of them. And then to go ahead and turn this feature off, well, you just need to go back where we turned it on the Home tab to the editing group, click on the drop down arrow and deselect filter, and we're back to where we started. The Advanced Filter feature will use more complex criteria when it comes to filtering records within your database than what you learned in the previous training video on simple criteria for the AutoFilter feature. Of course, we'll keep it simple here so you can get the basics, and then you can go nuts and use more complex criteria for the Advanced Filter. But before we go ahead and use it, first of all, you need to have your spreadsheet set up in that. You've got your main database where we have a list of all the homes that we're selling, and then over, in this case to the right, a sub-database or a mini database that contains the same labels or row header that you have over in the main database and the criteria below it. So this person's looking for a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath home. And to set that up, it's really simple. Just go ahead and select the row header that contains the labels in your database, copy it, and then in this case I pasted it over here. You can paste it wherever you want. And then of course be sure to enter in your criteria. Once you have that set up, then come up here, click on the Data tab, go to the Sort and Filter group, and there you go. There's the Advanced Filter feature. You can see in the pop-up it says Options for Filtering Using Complex Criteria. Now before I go ahead and click on it, it's easier if you go ahead and click and select any cell within the database, because when you click on it, if it recognizes the database, it'll select it for you. So you don't have to select it later on here, and we'll get to that in just a second. But first of all in the window, when it comes to filtering, do you want to filter the list in the place that you have your data, or do you want to copy that to another location and leave the database alone? We'll do both, so we'll leave it as is. And then down below it says, okay, where's the list or your database? And you can see it's got it selected. If it doesn't, go ahead and click on the collapsible dialog box button and then click and drag to select the database. Make sure you include the labels for each column because it's going to compare the labels in this database to the subdatabase to keep it on track. So for the criteria here, it needs to go, oh, bedrooms, bedrooms. I'll look down for 3. Let me go ahead and hit the Enter key on the keyboard to pop it back open. So there's the database that we're looking in, and here's the criteria for that database. Let me delete it, click on the collapsible dialog box button, and select the labels for the mini database, and then also the row below, just one row that contains the criteria. Even if you have no criteria below it, just select the one row below. If you try to do 2 or 3, well, you may run into issues, and that's something we'll cover later on here. But for right now, we'll keep it simple. Hit Enter, pop open the window, and then the unique records only means that if there's duplicates, just show me one. I don't need to see all of them. But since we're not going to have duplicates here for homes that are for sale, let's leave it as is. Click Okie dokie, and there you go. Let me go ahead and scroll over. It filtered it in place, and you can see over on the row headers there that it starts off at 1, and then it skips to 15, 16, and then hides everything else that doesn't meet the conditions that were set over here. And because it filtered in place, or on the same lines that I had for my mini database, well, we don't see the criteria there. So I'm thinking instead of doing it this way, where it filters the list in place, let's get the results in another place. So to go ahead and undo this, if we don't have the undo button, just come up here to the same group, sort and filter, and say clear, and we're back to where we started. So let's go ahead and do it again. Click Advanced, and then say this time we want to copy the results to another location. And down below this opens up and it says, okay, where's that location? I can go ahead and delete it. And you can click on the collapsible dialog box button if you want, or as long as the cursor's flashing in it, if you go ahead and I'll select that cell right there, that works. Go ahead and click Okie dokie, and there you go. Leaves this alone. I can see the criteria up above, and I can match it down below and go, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, 3, good. Okay, 2.5, oh, excellent. And like I said, you can make this more complex, like instead of 2.5 baths, we can do the list price. We want it something, we're looking in the neighborhood that's greater than 200,000 with a 3-bedroom. And then let's go ahead and do it again, Advanced Filter. You're going to have to reselect Copy to another location, because that always defaults to filter the list in place. And then go ahead and click Okie dokie, and there we go. So of the ones that are available, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 bedrooms. It returned only 3. All right, how about we want double? We want maybe 3 bedrooms and 5 bedrooms. And just look at the list of those two there. Well, let's go ahead and clear this out. Let's type in 5. Now remember, for the criteria, it was just the labels and the row below it. We now have to include the second row, so let's go ahead and click on Advanced. I'm going to go ahead and select Copy to another location. Criteria range has now changed, and we need to click on the collapsible button. Click and drag to select the extra row down below. Hit Enter, click Okie dokie, and there's 3 and 5 bedrooms. Now, if you clear the bottom row of any criteria and you go, oh, let's just go for 3 bedrooms, and you click on Advanced, and you copy to another location, click Okie dokie, it doesn't like it. So it returns everything, saying, oh, well, we got nothing in here, so I guess that means everything. Keep that in mind so you don't get results that you're not looking for. So let's go ahead and click and drag to select it and delete the results and scroll back up. Let's go back to 2.5 baths to keep it simple. And go ahead and scroll back. And to automate this a bit more, we can use what are called macros. In other words, it's kind of annoying for me to come up here every time, click on Advanced, copy to another location, and click OK. Instead, how about if I go ahead and record those steps and place them into buttons? Now that's what a macro is basically, is that it records your steps you can quickly execute in a single click. Well, in this case it's going to be a single click by clicking on a button. You can use shortcut keys to execute the macro, and we're going to be covering macros later on, but I feel it's important right now, at least in this training video, to show you this because if you're going to use this, it could be quite tedious if you don't have a little bit of help. So I'll keep it simple, and then to learn more about macros, you want to watch my macros training video. So this is what you're going to do. We want to go ahead and start recording what we typically do, those steps that says look at the criteria here and filter, but copy the results over into this location. So to record those steps, we need to turn on the recorder. We can come up here and click on the Developer tab and go to the Code group, and there it is, Record Macro. Or if you don't have the Developer tab up, you can go to the View tab, go to the Macros group, click on the Macros drop-down arrow and record. How do you bring up the Developer tab? Well, you right-click anywhere on the ribbon, you go to Customize the ribbon, and you come down here and you check Developer because by default it's not checked and it's not showing. Let me click Cancel. So let's use Developer since the record is right there and I don't have to click on a button to start recording. In fact, you can even come down here and right-click on the status bar and check Macro Recording, and you can see that it's right there. Because if I uncheck it, it disappears. Let me go ahead and check it so it's right there for me to click on to start recording. So let's click on it, and it says, okay, what's the name of the macro that we're recording? We're going to say filter. And down below you can assign a shortcut key and say, let's do Q. So when I do Control Q, it's automatically going to execute all the steps that you're going to see here in a blink of an eye. And you want to store this in this workbook. Again, this is stuff that we're going to be covering in a later training video and go over the basics of macros, but right off the bat you can see that you can store it in this workbook, a new workbook, or a personal macro workbook, and then the description. You can go ahead and type in the description. In any case, when you're done, go ahead and click Okie dokie, and it's recording. Now it's not recording times, it's recording steps or actions. And down below you can see that the stop button is available. It says a macro is currently recording. Just click stop when you're done executing all the steps. And so if I move my mouse around, like I said, it's not recording time. So the first thing we want to do is to go ahead and click anywhere within the database, then come up here and click on the Data tab and click on Advanced. And we want to copy the results to another location. In the list range, let's go ahead and delete that and click on the collapsible dialog box button and click and drag to select our range. Hit enter to pop it back open. Remember, it's recording all the steps that we're executing here. In the criteria, let's delete that, collapse it, select our range here, hit enter, and we want to copy to, let's delete it, and just select the cell right here. Let's do I6. And then click Okie dokie. When we're done, click stop, and that's it. Just go ahead and delete the range there. And to execute the macro, remember the shortcut key was Control Q, Control Q. Ooh, that's so fun. And it always goes over to the same cell that we selected here, which that's fine. You'll learn more about macros. We don't have to go to that cell. We can just start recording without going into the database. You can go ahead and delete that. And let's try it if we just did 3 bedrooms. Control Q. Hey, there we go. Isn't that fun? And then how about if we have a macro that instead of me busting my hump and selecting the range here and deleting it every time, that it automatically deletes that range. Now I have to keep in mind that if I get the results that equals the same range here, which is what, about 24 right here, then when I record the steps to delete a range, I want to go down to about 24. And just to be safe, I can go down further. So let's go ahead and record that. Just come down here, click on record, and we'll say this is delete. And you can use a shortcut, I'm not. Let's click Okie dokie. And then we'll click in this cell and go over, and we'll go down, down, down. Oh, okay, we went too far, but hit the delete key on the keyboard. And then when we're done, I'll place the selection right back in cell I6, and then click on stop, and that's it. So Control Q, and then if I had a shortcut, whatever shortcut keys are available, I could have it automatically cleared. But since I didn't do a shortcut key, then to go ahead and use the macro, I can do one of 2 other things. I can either come up here on the View tab, go to the Macros group, click on the drop-down arrow, and say View them. And there's the delete. Click on Run, and it deletes it. You also have it on the Developer tab where you can look at the macros and filter, run, delete, run. Or what you can do is you can insert 2 buttons here. You click on one to filter, you click on the other to delete. So we create the buttons, we assign the macros to the buttons so we can really pop through our advanced filter without having to do it manually every time by going through all those steps. So with the Developer tab open, we want to go to the Controls group, click on the Insert drop-down arrow, and choose the Form Control, the button. Click on it, and then you can see when I move my mouse around, we got a plus sign. Go ahead and click and drag, so it's about. Then after I drag it about yay big, it says, okay, assign a macro to this button. Oh, that's nice. I don't have to go out and assign it. It'll open up a window. Let's do the filter, click okie dokie, and there it is. That's button 1. Okay, well that doesn't make sense to me. Let's go ahead and, with it selected, change the name. If I accidentally click outside of it and I hover over it, if I click on it, it's going to execute it. How do I go ahead and click on it to get inside the button to change the text? Well, you can right click on it and then go ahead and click on the border. And once you do that, it's in edit mode. So I can go ahead and click inside the button and change the text and save. In fact, you can even format it if you want. Let's go to the Home tab, change the size, or let me click off. Again, you can right click on it to reselect it and then go down to Format Control. And let's choose color red. Let's do bold. Okie dokie. Oh, that looks better. Okay, we'll do the same thing for clearing it. Let's add a button down below by going to the Developer tab, Insert, another button, click and drag. What macro do we want to assign? Delete. Okie dokie. And then in here, we'll say, and click off, and there we go. Clear, filter, before, after, before, after. And we can go ahead and do 2 bedrooms with anything greater than 2 baths. Let's go ahead and filter. Isn't that fancy? And then, of course, to go ahead and get rid of all this if you want, just right-click, and when you see the lines around it, the resizing handles, which, by the way, you can go ahead and click and drag on those resizing handles. I'm going to go ahead with the resizing handles around it, hit the delete key on the keyboard to get rid of it, right-click on the border, go ahead and click on the border, hit the delete key, and they're gone. Of course, the macros aren't gone. To get rid of those, we can go over this in more depth in the macros training video, but if you're aching right now, then go ahead and click on macros, brings up the window, and in case if you missed it because we were going through it and focusing on running it or assigning it, you got the delete option there. And then one last thing that you learn in the macros, that when you save your workbook that contains a macro, you can't save it normally, as you can see up here with the extension .xlsx, because when you click on save, it says, no, this contains macros, and in order to save this, you got to convert this into a macro workbook. And the reason why Excel does that is because with macros, you can create a code, if you know how to create codes, that when you send it to somebody, they can really wreak havoc on your computer. So as a security measure, you either have to have an Excel workbook that is macro-free, or if you want one that contains macros, at least those who receive a workbook from you can identify and say, hey, wait a second, because that's a macro workbook, I'm not sure if I trust it and want to open it. Because before, you could save macros in the same file and not convert it to a different file format. So when you opened it up, you were caught off guard and you're like, oh, there's macros in here, and oh, it destroyed my computer. Again, it's for people using macros for nefarious reasons to destroy your computer. So to save a file with these features, click no and then choose a macro-enabled file type in the file type list. So we'll say no, and then it opens up, click on the Save as Type drop-down arrow, and there you go, macro-enabled workbook. And you can see the extension is different. It's got an M instead of the last extension X. And if you want to know more about extensions, then I recommend that you watch my Windows training video on extensions. In any case, there you go. Select it and click Save. And it's happy. And you can see up in the title bar, XLS, not the X, but the M for macro. And then, by the way, if somebody sends you this file, it's going to look different than all the other Excel files. Let me show you. Let me minimize this down to the taskbar and open up the exercises folder on my desktop because that's where I saved it into. Double click. And there you go. Well, okay. Can you see the difference? Okay, it's too small. Let me go ahead and click on the drop down arrow and say we want to see medium icons. And there you go. You see the extension M, and then you can see that, hey, which one of these is not like the other? This one doesn't look like that one, and that one's got the regular extension on it. Let me move my mouse out of the way. The basic X, and this one's got, well, an exclamation point as part of the icon to let you know that that's the symbol for macro. So if you don't have extensions turned on your Windows computer, that you can't see the extension here, then look at the icon and make sure you don't see an exclamation point. Because if you do, and somebody says, psst, here, go ahead and open this, and you don't know who that person is or who sent it to you, don't do it. It could contain code that could really do damage to your computer. The subtotals feature will total up rows of related data. Well, what kind of related data are we talking about? If you look at my Play-Doh Inc. database here, I've got, well, sales for these products in the month of October, November, December. So there's the related data if I want to get a subtotal for all the products we sold in October, and then get a subtotal for the products in November, December, or even by year. All the products sold, get a subtotal for the year 2013 and then 2014. Now the subtotals feature won't work in tables, so if you got a table and you want to use it, then convert it to a data range, which we learned about in an earlier training video. Well, let me show you. Let me go ahead and click on any cell within the data range here and convert it to a table by coming up here and clicking on the Insert tab, going to the Tables group, clicking on Table. It selects the entire data range, click Okie dokie. Now it's a table, and you can see up here the Related Contextual Design tab table. Well, my resolution's a bit smaller. If you had a wider screen, you would see the table tools up there. In any case, if I come up here and click on the Data tab, go to the Outline group, you can see that the subtotal feature isn't available until I go ahead and convert it back to a data range, and there it is. And you can see in the pop-up that it says it quickly calculates rows of related data by inserting subtotals and totals. So I'll get my subtotals for every time there's a change here in month, where it goes from October, then November, then December, and then the total amount, or the grand total, for all these subtotals here. And that brings up a good point. If I want to get a subtotal for all the products double bubble, you can see I got one here, I've got one down here. The subtotal feature only works if the data is related and grouped. In other words, if I sort it so all the double bubbles are together, so I can get a subtotal for all the double bubbles, and then a subtotal for all the nerds rope. If they're scattered, it can't get a subtotal because we got one here, and then it puts a total there, one there, puts a total there. No, it needs them all grouped together, and we can do that by sorting A to Z. So go ahead and click anywhere in that column, and then you can come up here on the Data tab to the Sort and Filter group and do A to Z, or just right-click and go down to Sort and then A to Z. So now I can get a subtotal for all the double bubbles. Let me go ahead and undo that. Let's just do it for every change in the month so I can get subtotals for all the products sold in the month of October, then November, and so on. It's really simple. Just come up here on the Data tab to the Outline group, click on Subtotal, and it says, okay, we want a subtotal at each change in what category or what label here. Every time there's a change in the year, well, you can imagine if I had 2013 here, then 2014, 2013, 2014, I'd get a subtotal every time there was a change. Again, it's important that you get them all grouped together by sorting it. So I sorted my month columns so I have all the Octobers together grouped, and then all the Novembers, Decembers, and so on. So let's do it by month. So every time there's a change in the month, give me a subtotal. What function do I want to use? Do I want to get a subtotal that's a sum or a count, an average? Well, go ahead and scroll down and see all the rest. I'm going to go ahead and do sum. And then where do we want to add the subtotal to? Well, the subtotal is going to be based upon and added to. Let's do it by those that are sold. So let me go ahead and check sold and uncheck income. And you can do it for both. I mean, you got multiple selections here. And then go ahead and click Okie dokie. And there it is. Every time there's a change in October, it gives me a subtotal for the related data, or the Octobers here, and Novembers are related, so it gives me a subtotal there. Fabulous. Then I finally get my grand total for all the subtotals. And then notice over here under the name box, we've got the levels 1, 2, and 3. And what that does, let me go ahead and scroll back up, is that because of the subtotals, you can go ahead and collapse them by level. So if I go to level 1, that's the grand total. Go to level 2, then I just see the subtotals for all the related data for all the months of October, November, December. Then if I want to see all, that's level 3, pops everything open. You can do it that way, or you can see these little minus signs that when you click on it, it collapses, in this example, just October. So if you're giving a presentation or if you're doing your own analysis here and you don't want to see the details of October or December, but just November, go ahead and click on the minus sign to collapse it. And then the plus sign means that there's more than what you see here, so go ahead and click on it to expand it, and we're back to, well, let's go to level 3. Now we're back to where we started, where we can see everything. And then if you want to go ahead and remove it, just come up here, click on Subtotal again to get Remove All, and we're back to where we started. Now, besides the subtotal feature here, there is the subtotals function, and what that does is that, well, let me go ahead and insert it below by hitting the equals key and typing in the first couple letters, arrow down to select it, and it says returns a subtotal in a list or database. Go ahead and hit the tab key to pop open the function. It says, okay, for subtotals, do you want it for an average of a range, counting, max, min? We can do sum, double click, and then hit comma to go to the next argument in the syntax, and it says, hey, what's the first reference for your subtotals? In other words, I can go ahead and select one range, and then comma, go to another range, and comma, go to another range, and have all the ranges come up as one subtotal here. Let's do this range right here, click and drag and go all the way up for income, and then comma, and we can go ahead and select another range, but let's not do that. Let me go ahead and scroll down and hit the backspace key, hit enter, and there you go, 33,000 was the income. When it comes to subtotal, you know in an earlier training video how you can hide your data. Like if I want to go ahead and click on row 42 and drag all the way up to row 4 and right click the selection and say hide. Even though we can't see all but one row here, the subtotal feature will still bring in the total amount because it sees it, so it's unaffected by us hiding any rows or columns if we hit any columns, but in this case it's about 40 rows. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel to get notified of the latest videos. And for great specials on my products, please see the description below this video.